Hello, Blenders, and welcome to episode number 210. Oh, a nice round number, 210 of Real Blend, a podcast that is changing its name. I didn't tell you guys this. We're changing our name effectively, inspired by the Fast and the Furious. We're going to be called Real Blend X. So awesome. From here on out, yeah, just brand all of our stuff.
I mean, that does make sense that, you know, we haven't been good for a while, so that does fall in line.
Genuine question. Are they calling it Fast X or are they just calling it Fast 10?
Fast 10, and they're just using Roman numeral. That's a good question.
Okay.
Well, Jason X was Jason X.
Yeah, Jason X.
It was Jason X.
Was that the 10th Jason
masterpiece?
Movie?
It was the 10th.
It was the 10th Jason movie.
It
bothers me that you have to ask that.
This is a classic Fast and Furious of missing the boat on something. They went to space in number 9. So they should have waited till the 10th one to send them to space.
Well, only Tyrese and Ludacris went to space, so we haven't seen Vin Diesel go to space yet.
If they're following in Jason's footsteps, does that mean one day we're going to get Fast and Furious Go to Hell?
And then we're gonna get Fast and Furious v Mission Impossible or something.
It'll be Manhattan, didn't they?
What was a knockoff, Full Throttle or whatever? It'll be the fast knockoff that we got.
It'd be Furious v Jurassic.
Yeah, that was now that one I'm here for.
Because they're Universal properties. You could literally
They've got to outrun dinosaurs with the fast cars. And they got to steal like a serum, probably.
Think about
no-brainer. And then they bring in the Minions.
Yeah, Pratt's on his bike.
Movies.
Yeah, man. You could have Jaws show up.
I want to see Vin Diesel on a Stegosaurus.
Who doesn't?
That's all I want out of life.
Me too.
That's all I've ever asked for. On this week's show. Hi, everyone. We have a new teaser for the trailer. I'm sorry. Start that over. We have a new teaser for the full movie, Thor, Love and Thunder. The Northman and the Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent are both going to be hitting theaters. And then the filmmakers behind the Nick Cage movie, both Kevin Etten and Tom Gormican, are going to be joining the show for an exclusive interview. We've all jumped into the show, but let me start by introducing the guys. Jake Hamilton of Fox 32 in Chicago. Hi, Jakey. How are you?
Sean O'Connell, how are you doing, Bubba?
I'm well. I feel like we haven't done this in a really long time. I don't know why.
Didn't we do it last week?
Yes, it's generally how it goes. It just feels like a while. Like Gabe maybe
you're getting anxious because can I tease that like maybe we all might be in the same room within the coming weeks? Yeah, we might all be in the same room. Is this a hashtag if it happens? It feels like it's happening.
It feels like it's happening. Yeah. It feels like it's happening. Kevin McCarthy.
My flights are booked. Yeah.
My flight's not. Well, my flight's not booked yet.
Oh,
Kevin McCarthy of Fox 5 in Washington, D.C. Is your flight booked yet?
They are not booked.
Yes.
So it's still, if it
might
happens.
be me in a room by myself.
Right.
Story of my life.
You and Miles Teller. And then Gabe Kovach. Hi, Gabe. How are you doing?
Hi, folks. How you doing?
Yes. Good to see you guys. All right, let's go. Intro the guys. Let's move on to housekeeping. If you're watching us on YouTube, thank you very much for joining us. Please head down, give us a like and a subscribe. Join us here every single week for the newest episode of Real Blend, usually with a video element for our guests as well, too. If you are an audio listener and want to join us in video form, head to youtube.com/Real Blend Premium. Have you signed up for Real Blend Premium yet, by the way? We drop on Mondays. And in this week's episode, we're doing a mailbag. So we solicited some questions from Real Blend listeners, and some good ones came across. And then Gabe has a whole collection of them, and we're gonna answer them. So check the description where you are listening for information on where to sign up. So, like I said, a lot of show to get to
really
this
quick.
week.
Have you ever gotten a question that was either so ridiculous or so inappropriate that you thought, "Oh, I'm not asking that"?
I want to say yes, but maybe not as drastic as like you've set that up. Like I feel like I don't have an example, which is not as entertaining. But I feel like I've definitely gotten at least one or two where I was like, that won't make for good. That's not going to make anyone feel
This
good.
feels like a challenge now.
I was going to say, all right, listeners.
We need some inappropriate
all right, loyal listeners.
I don't remember what it was, but I remember the feeling of seeing a question and being like, yeah, I don't know if I can ask that.
I'm so curious. Okay. All right. Proceed.
So mailbag, if you're listening to Premium, which drops on Monday. In the meantime, we had an interview with Robert Eggers, too, that dropped earlier this week.
Yes.
So go check that one out. It's available where all your podcast needs are met. And we also have a video element for that on the YouTube channel. We're going to talk about the Northman a little bit later. Returning guest, Robert Eggers, by the way. So we had him come around for the Lighthouse. And this week's guest is, as mentioned, screenwriter Kevin Etten and his director Tom Gormican. The two of them collaborated on the new Nicolas Cage film and Pedro Pascal film, The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. So we got them on the show to sit down and talk about making that. And a lot of things Nick Cage. If you like Nick Cage, this is the interview for you. So continue listening, and we'll see you on the other side. Good to be with you guys, Kevin and Tom. We are, as mentioned, the Roboland Podcast. We are a Filmmakers podcast. We like to get into the nitty gritty of the whole process to get to the film reaching theaters. And I want to start with this because the entire concept of massive talent works on paper. But I just want to know, in those early stages, that if Nick Cage had said no to the pitch, would you have scrapped the idea entirely and just said it wasn't meant to be? Or is it a concept that you could have fashioned around another sort of beloved personality?
Well, two things. One is, I think we should call our company Works on Paper. That would be, we've been thinking what to name it, and I feel like that might be a good one. But I think, yeah, we were sort of resigned. Thank you very much. We'd like you to be part of it. So I think we were sort of resigned to the idea that there was nobody else that we could slot into this particular narrative. We had crafted it so carefully around the persona and the things that were in Nicolas Cage's life, and the people's view of who he might be and what they think about him, and it's so baked in that I think we were just like, this would have been a colossal waste of time.
To be honest, I think there were, for me, selfishly, as a person who has a son and a mortgage, I at times was willing to try to talk myself into other names. Tom held more firm correctly as he should have, but ultimately it doesn't work. I will say we did talk about at one point, or a friend pitched to us a very funny idea, which was the idea that if you had Christian Bale or Daniel Day-Lewis in Nick Cage prosthetics playing Nick Cage, that is a version that we could get behind.
Yeah, that was a version we liked, because you're like, come on, Daniel Day doing Cage in prosthetic would have been great. But then we were like,
I gotta bet he's so good, I'm not entirely sure it wasn't Daniel Day-Lewis playing Nick Cage.
Neither are we, by the way. But we
had just the Nick reveal?
No, but we even got to the point where we were like, what if then he plays Sergio, the Italian guy? Do we just take the prosthetics off and it's Daniel Day-Lewis? And we were like, maybe that's insane. Well, we went down this road pretty far, because that was the only other one that we thought potentially had some legs, but we also don't know either of them. So yeah, maybe.
And Daniel Day-Lewis is so method, he would ask people to call him Cage, and it'd be really meta, super meta to experience that. I really found your composer choice interesting, Mark Isham, who's one of a brilliant composer, but he's composed 2 other Nick Cage films, which I found fascinating. He composed Next and Bad Lieutenant, and I found that interesting. Was that at all a thought process, this guy has already scored films with Nick Cage, or was that a coincidence you figured out in the process? I found that really interesting that he had already done 2 other Nick Cage films.
Yeah, well, look, we always knew that this was going to be a super tall order for a composer, because the movie jumps genres so many times, and it was kind of a call where we're like, do we have somebody that can really nail when it becomes an action film, or the dramatic parts of the film, which is Mark, and then there's some comedy score, which at the beginning, and there's some comedic ideas and some emotionality, and we were like, okay, how is one composer going to do this whole thing? And we sort of landed on, let's go for what Mark does best, and then figure out what we need for the other parts of the film. But it wasn't based on him having done other Nick Cage movies before. It was really just we were a fan of his music.
But did that come up in conversation at all, that he had already done 2 Cage films that helped the process at all?
Yeah, he has a sense of what Nick does as a performer, so that I think helped him. But they each kind of carve out their own strange tone, and he was up for the challenge.
Cool.
Guys, there's a great moment in the movie where Javi and Nick walk into kind of Javi's room of memorabilia that's a love letter to Nick Cage. And there's some really great stuff in there, particularly the VX gas from The Rock. I would love to have that prop. I'm curious, were any of those props actual props from past films, or did you guys have to recreate these props from some of his classic films?
Well, we had to recreate them, because it was peak kind of pre-vaccine pandemic, it was very difficult to ship anything into the country, from materials for costumes, because we made a lot of the stuff that they're wearing. We had to basically, we tried to order and ship in the posters and some of the other stuff, but like that we didn't create. But like those props you're specifically talking about are not the real ones from the movie. There was no way to get them there.
Wait, what'd you guys do with them? Because I kind of want them.
I don't know. We have this fantasy that either Nick or Pedro has like the wax sculpture of Nicolas Cage at their house.
That's a good question. Someone has that.
Yeah, where is that?
Someone has it.
You don't know where that went?
I have no idea where it went. Everything was so insane when we were working over there, and the country was shut down and had a curfew, and we just sort of left set, and I don't know what happened to it.
That one I have to say.
Oh my God!
There's the fun story there too is that that prop came in and it didn't really look the way we thought it was going to look, and we had.
I think it had melted.
Yeah, it had melted slightly, and we did what we could to kind of make it the best version of itself. But we got to set, and Nick and Pedro looked at it, and we looked at it, and we're like, okay, we need to do a little rewriting here, which played great comedically, because it allows Nick to go like, that's supposed to be me. It's grotesque. And then
that's to me, that's what sells that moment. I love that. That's fantastic.
I was so nervous. We walked him over to that thing, and I was like, I gotta show him the wax sculpture, which it looks so terrible. And like, I was so nervous about what he was gonna do, but he immediately sort of embraced the ridiculousness of it, and it was like.
Am I the only one that thought it didn't look that bad? I thought it looked pretty.
Well, no. So we had Bill Corso, who's our makeup
genius.
and prosthetics guy, who's a genius. I was like, Bill, you have to help me. You have to dive in on this one, and he did. He was like, give me like 25 minutes with this thing, and that's how good we could get it, like to what it looks like there, which is not too bad. But like the half hour prior to that, when it was unveiled for me, was a deeply uncomfortable one.
Did it look like Travolta?
That would have been Travolta holding the gold guns. That actually would have been really funny.
So I want you guys to drill down a little bit further on the point that you just made, which is we've been able to have a lot of really interesting conversations with filmmakers who have movies coming out recently who had to shoot during pandemic, and obstacles that they ran into and really creative ways that they overcame them. So what is something that happened to you guys during this production that you're really proud of, how you sort of pivoted or thought on the fly and made something happen?
Well, there are a couple instances. The first one was we prepped a movie in Bogota to shoot in Mexico, where Javi was the head of a cartel. And, you shut down, you go, okay, you can only shoot in this particular part of the world. Who is he now, right? And so we had to recraft, part of the script to make him an arms dealer. The narrative was always the same, but we're trying to figure out who this person might be and make it a little bit more of an international story. So there were things like that, but the shocking thing to me was trying to cast people who are there for just like the therapist, for example, right?
Oh,
She's there
sure.
for a day. You want a person for a day, they need to quarantine in their country. She was in London for like 7 days, then quarantine for 10 days in our, where we were shooting in Budapest, and then you get them on on your set on day 18. So you're going, hey, who wants to come to Budapest for 1 day of acting? We need 18 days of your time. And it became incredibly difficult, especially if half the people were like, I have to shoot something else like on this day, and so all those little things that you don't ordinarily think about at all became massive challenges to overcome, and that was hard.
And one of the bigger obstacles was, our DP got COVID, and then Tom got COVID. So we worked through both of those. We didn't shut down, and so it was just using iPads, and Nigel could see what he needed to see, and I would hold up an iPad, and he could talk to the actors, and I would talk to him, and then I'd talk to the actors. So we kept going through two big personnel having COVID and did not shut down, because we were under a real. I mean, that was just like we needed to be wrapped by Christmas basically, and if we kept stopping, we weren't gonna. The movie, it was sort of like, we just wanted to get it done.
I mean, we what I didn't love was sort of how much people seem to love me not being there, like I didn't, when I came back, I was like, hey, everybody, I thought it was going to be, they sort of got used to the process and enjoyed it. Like they could just kind of turn the iPad away and not have to hear.
It's not working. Notes. Sorry, Tom.
Yeah, Kevin's like knocking the iPad over.
The Wi-Fi's bad. I'm sorry. I'll give him the notes.
Okay, yeah. It's like, hey guys, no, hey, wait a second. It's like, that was a not cool part of it. But it was just like every little moment became like an inventive thing where you're like, how do we do this? And
yeah. It's magic that movies ever come together.
Yeah, God, your DP is lighting scenes through an iPad. It's insane. That's absolutely insane.
It felt insane when we were doing it. I'm going, does this look okay?
At one point, we were shooting a scene and we thought some of the COVID test results came back, and we thought that one of the actresses had COVID, so we had to pull her out of a scene that was already partially shot. And it turns out she didn't have COVID.
Yeah.
It was a false positive.
And it was in a Jeep, right? It was a scene in the Jeep where the 4 girls are in there and she disappears for one of those shots. And I'm going, we have to pull her out, and I can't tell anybody what her health information is. So I'm going, we're just gonna go on a longer lens, guys, and really get in there. And they're like, what are you talking about? This is, it's crazy. I'm going, nah, it's gonna look cool. Trust me. And they were like, it didn't look cool. She didn't have COVID. We put her back in, widened back out, and we finished the scene. And it was like,
that's
just
hilarious.
Little crazy challenges. Yeah.
This movie is literally the definition of necessity is the mother of invention.
Yeah.
I will say the hardest thing, though, I think, was that, we didn't really get to like have those big cast dinners or like hang out with Nick and really like get to download on what was working and what wasn't. And so it all had to happen on set, which was just created more time pressure, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. I spoke to you both yesterday, and one of the things I found interesting, obviously, was I was asking you about how you were able to get licensed for the footage to use all the films and Con Air and all those moments. And you said that Paddington 2 was the one you couldn't get footage for because you couldn't put it into an R-rated movie. Did you attempt to get that footage in there, and like what was that process like? And if like would you have tried another film, or was Paddington 2 kind of the joke you kind of wanted to go for? I was just curious if there were other options, or was like, were you surprised you couldn't use the footage?
We were surprised, and we would not budge off of the Paddington 2 joke. We were sort of we were in love with it.
I think the only one I pitched that I kind of liked, but it's not as good, was the SpongeBob movie. But
the SpongeBob movie. Yeah, that's right. And we were like, we're not doing it.
Yeah,
we'd rather not
better.
Show it and sort of awkwardly shoot around it than lose that joke. There's just something about it that made us happy.
It's one of the really, we spoke about this yesterday. One of the really great side effects of this movie is that Nick is having this moment where we all get to pause and just let him know how much we appreciate him and we appreciate his work and we value his really incredible filmography. And it's not really the kind of moment that a lot of actors get, where a film is kind of a love letter to his career. Who is another actor you think deserves a moment like this, for us to pause and talk to him or her and say, hey, like we value and we appreciate everything you've done for us?
I mean, if Daniel Day-Lewis is really retired, that would be somebody I would say, how can we figure out how to change that? Like, that would be one.
Yeah, I mean, God, who else would we give a tribute to?
Who would be the Daniel
Reeves
Day-Lewis character that's Keanu Reeves?
Keanu, yeah.
The Point Break. What a great one. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's so many great actors and actresses.
Who would be the Daniel Day-Lewis character that would be like the character he talks to, that like screams at him and talks to him about himself? Would it be like Lincoln?
Lincoln, I would
Bill the Butcher.
Well,
yeah.
Well, we made that's a character, and Nick specifically on that didn't want to play a character in his film, so I think it would maybe just be a guy like cobbling away, like on his shoes, and
right.
Just being like, I think you're making terrible choices. But does Daniel Day-Lewis make bad choices?
I don't know. Yeah, Daniel Plainview, is that?
Yes,
that's what I was thinking. Like, he's just drinking a milkshake the whole movie.
Yeah.
That would have been awesome.
All right, so let's get to Nikki as a character, because to go all the way back to the beginning of this conversation, that character works really well on paper, but you don't know until you start trying to pull it off whether it's going to play the way that you want it to play, essentially. So at what point did you finally accept that, oh, this is going to work. We can actually lean into this, and it's going to be what we want it to be.
Well, it's funny. The first part of your statement there about it working on paper and we don't know how it's going to was the exact conversation we had with the head of the studio. It was like, I have zero confidence you guys are going to be able to pull this off. Okay, let's see what happens. And we didn't really know, and we were constantly shaping that character. But one of the things that Nikki allowed Nick to do is, because I'm interested in naturalistic performances that are smaller and kind of more nuanced, and Nick is, of course, an expressionistic actor who's interested in these larger-than-life characters and moments, he was able to channel a lot of that energy into Nikki, while giving us a version of Nick that felt a little bit more grounded and real, except for the moments where he decided to go, full Cage that we had talked about, like when he's on the wall on acid or whatever. But that allowed to have this kind of split, so you got different versions of Nick Cage because there's two of them. But it did take some culling. We had a little bit too much of Nikki at the beginning, and we had to find the right level that audiences felt like they would accept and not tire of that character's shtick in the story.
Yeah, there were like maybe...
That's nonsense. I would watch an entire movie of an entire movie.
That's, I don't disagree. And then there were a couple moments where we thought, I'll give you an example. When Nick is going to quit acting and he's walking down the hallway, you can see that the framing is slightly off because it was framed to have Nikki following him. There was a scene between the two of them where he's going, and we decided in that moment that it was just better story-wise to be with Nick, to understand that he's bottoming out, to understand that he's deeply depressed, and not be trying to land like this somewhat comic idea of a voice in your head giving you terrible advice. So there were certain things that we were just like, we didn't know how it was going to work, and story-wise thought it was correct. And
we did cut a pretty funny scene, or we had to kind of cut a funny scene where young Nick shows up in the section when they're writing their screenplay and coming up with the ideas. And basically his function was that anytime Javi would pitch an idea for his own character, young Nick would pop up and go, wait a minute, so wait, he gets to play kind of the Christ figure? And then, Nick would immediately go like, well, so maybe like there should be like dueling Christ figures. And it was fun. It was just a little like, it just slowed, it was a pace issue again.
Yeah, and I was the guy yesterday. I'm sorry for asking you if you called it decaging when you were at decaging. Yeah, I apologize for that.
Don't apologize.
So our show is so filmmaker focused that there's a shot that I wanted to bring up to you again because I think it's brilliant and I think people will look out for it. It's my favorite shot in the whole film. I'm hoping that Nigel was there on this day to do this shot in person, but there's a moment when they're looking up at obviously the figure of Castor Troy with the golden guns, and we get the camera comes around and we perfectly align with Nick Cage's reflection with the actual figure. And it's like a beautiful moment because as somebody, like I told you, I love that teaser trailer for Face Off when it starts on Cage and goes around, or starts on Travolta and goes around to Cage. But that shot in particular, can you talk to our audience about how you pulled that off, how you kept the camera from getting into the reflection? That's a really hard shot, but also it's brilliant. It's a perfect shot.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I had been dead set on that idea because I had it in my mind that like this was the concept of the film, and I don't understand marketing that well, so I was like, this could be the trailer. You just play this one shot coming around. I'm like, this is it. Nick Cage becoming the characters that he played in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s. He's becoming the hero, and I was like, okay, this is cool. So we started there, and the idea for it came when I was watching Paris, Texas, where you're getting the reflection in the glass when they're talking to each other, and you can see both faces and they're kind of lined up. So that is a movie that I love and I think is beautiful, and that was the inspiration for it. And then we just had to figure out how to pull it off. And I will say this. We had tried a couple of times to start where the shot you see starts and come around Nick, but it ended up working. We had to start with the faces aligned, and then there was a circular dolly around the case, and we just moved the camera and just cheated the angles a little bit on the glass so that we could that you wouldn't catch all of the camera. And there were little remnants and things that showed up that we had to digitally take care of, but it was that's how the entire thing came together.
Oh, What a shot, man! It's so it's literally the movie. You're right. It's the movie.
It's the movie, and my favorite thing about it, and I'm sort of a fan of slightly imprecise filmmaking, and they don't actually line up. They're just slightly off, and it's an idea that I find to be very funny. They're like, and it's just like he's not quite becoming that guy, and it's like,
the figure melted.
Yeah,
to be fair.
Exactly.
One of the things this movie proves to me is that Nick Cage has to have a really great sense of humor about himself, particularly like the first act. It's a lot of jokes about the status of his career. Not that we went anywhere. Maybe there are a couple of jokes at the expense of like his financial situation. I'm sort of curious, were there any jokes that you kind of went like, oh, maybe we're going a little too far making fun, like maybe we should scale it back a little bit? And because anytime like an actor goes on SNL and makes fun of themselves, I think that's the greatest thing, and it says a lot about who they are as a person. And I'm sort of curious, was there anything that you like, maybe we scale this back down from 11?
I mean, I think I don't have one in mind, but I will say that kind of what made this performance really special, I think, was that, we did work on the first act in terms of calibrating how bad of a father he was. But once the script was locked and we were going to do it, Nick was so committed to it that he was kind of willing to go full at it. But because he was so committed, it was like hard for him. I remember when we were doing the scene with the daughter in the therapy room, and that was something that like he just was dreading. I remember because it was it was like he knew that he was going to have to call upon some real emotions from his own life, and he because he was going to play it as real as he could, and he knew that in that scene he was going to have to portray this kind of father that he's not really, but we're all not the fathers we always want to be. So you know what I mean? I always found that fascinating that he was like always willing to play this character, but then also bring parts of himself to all of it.
Wow. Yeah, those are the more.
There's no script to parenting might be my favorite line in the movie, actually.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he for us, those were the most interesting moments. The intersection of real Nick and actual Nick. And I said that you can write those lines and they make us laugh, and then you can give them to Nick, and you can go, I hope that he's not offended by this. And then you get to set, and you actually have to put cameras and a crew around him, and we have to stand there, and Nick has to perform these sometimes raw, vulnerable ideas that like about himself, and like that became deeply uncomfortable and fragile. But I think it's the thing that makes people very interested in his performance in this film.
Yeah, Kevin, I'm going to ask you about a joke that's very specific, and it doesn't occur till sort of the end of the film, so I'm going to dance around it because it's a spoiler. But you have a payoff when someone gets rescued by Nick Cage, that they are surprised that they're being rescued by Nick Cage. Was that joke always there? Because when that happened, I think I laughed the hardest in the entire film.
Yeah, that I believe was there. And Katrine Vankova is the actress, and she, isn't on screen that much, but my God, we got lucky. She has a smaller part, but she's really talented young actor who is so kind of a great, captivating movie face, but then so funny, and I agree, like that is one of the biggest laughs in the film. The great payoff, it's true.
And I think we work really hard at basically our setups and payoffs and paying off certain ideas that come back. Nick's audition speech, things like we're big fans of the idea that the things that we talk about earlier in the movie come back to affect both the plotting and landing jokes. And so those are things that we oftentimes find towards the end of the writing of the script and then insert them. And from a filmmaking point of view, they're so important to us. It makes you feel like very taken care of within the narrative.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I wanted to ask you guys how far any of these ideas may have gotten in terms of bringing other actors from other Nick Cage movies into the world. Like, was Travolta ever a part of conversation of having some face-off bit where he returns somehow?
Well, this was the thing we talked a lot about. We didn't want to have actors from Nick's movies in this thing because we felt that it potentially became confusing, because Nick is playing Nick, but like all of the other actors, are not playing themselves. So we're like, what world does this actually take place in? And then if there's actors from Nick's movies who are in there, you have whomever, Gina Gershon playing his wife, and you're like, well, they've worked together 5 or 6 times or something, and you're going, going, what's the reality? Like, what is this? Like, if we're referencing movie ideas, but people from those movies are in the film, that sort of breaks down like this. It didn't work for us script-wise. So we actually had to find people that hadn't worked with Nick before.
Which is hard to do.
Yeah, that's hard. Really interesting. We did. Everybody in. Yeah.
I know the first draft of, we talked about this yesterday, that the first draft of the screenplay, he was auditioning for Quentin Tarantino. That it was Quentin Tarantino was going to be the director before David Gordon Green. He really wanted this role in a Quentin Tarantino movie. Do you have any details on like what the role was going to be or what the Tarantino film was that he really so badly wanted to be a part of?
Oh yeah, we do. Yeah, we had a funny scene written at one point because it was basically the idea that he was like some kind of whaling captain from Boston, and so we had written a very funny scene at one point that I really enjoyed. That Nick goes to practice his accent. He goes up to like Santa Barbara to go whale watching, and he's kind of trying to get people. He's speaking in a Boston accent and like having conversations with like a mother and he's going like, "So where are you from?" And she says, "Wherever." And he's like, "So where do you think I'm from?" And she's like, "Boston." And he's like, "Okay, I'm doing this right."
But the communist scene, he's like, "Where do you think I'm from?" And she's like, "I don't really care." You know? And he's like, "Come on, just take a guess." And he's doing he's like, "Just come on, listen, but just take one guess." You know, and she's like,
"How are you?"
Boston, and he was like, "Close, Framingham, or whatever, you know, whatever the city." And we kept, and it just made us laugh. And then he went up to the whaling boat captain's office. Remember that? And he's like, "Would you mind if I drive the boat?" And the guy's like, "I don't give a shit." And he just leaves. And the studio's like,
"Yeah, guys."
And he's just sitting there, not driving. It's just going somewhere. We were like, yeah.
I think we turned in the draft, and they were like, the act one is a little long, and they're like, I mean, everybody was like, "Guys, so you clearly have to cut the whaling
captain scene."
Like,
yeah. What are you doing?
I never knew how badly I really wanted to see a Quentin Tarantino whaling captain Boston movie.
It sounded great
to see this.
It
sounds fantastic.
Aesthetic he hasn't done.
I want to just know, this may seem like such a basic question, but are you guys still able to enjoy Nick Cage movies? Or is the immersion sort of just killed that buzz for right now?
I mean, for me, yes, absolutely. He goes so deep into these characters that he's playing. Like I just, recently watched Pig, and I got a chance to meet Michael, the director, and we were talking about it. And like I loved his film, and I love Nick's performance in it. And it's so wildly and completely different than anything that we did in our film that it's like it's so easy for me to enjoy that. Like Nick is just, he's immersive.
Yeah, I can still watch it. I mean, it's like, there are actors who only have a certain amount of tricks, I would call them, and you start seeing them. But
like which actors? Kind of.
But I mean, Nick's there's just so many that you can just you get lost. I still get lost in stuff.
Yeah.
There was like a little line that I liked because I'm a featurette Blu-ray fan. I watch them all the time, and there's a joke in the movie about like the making of featurette of National Treasure for like the running sequence, which I found really great because I love those moments.
Really funny.
When this comes to Blu-ray and home media, what is the making of featurette, this behind the scenes aspect that's going to be the coolest to see?
I wonder, I haven't seen all of the footage that we have. We have like EPK footage from the shooting of the movie, but like everything felt so intense at the time we were making it. But I wonder what is going to be the coolest part of that. I mean, there's so many fun moments of just like, watching Nick watch the footage of Nikki because it was split screen, so it's like Nick watching Nick act with Nick on the monitor, and there's like shots that just like, it's sort of become this weird metaverse of Nicolas Cage's, I'm actually curious to see myself.
I am too. I mean, we were joking that there was a moment at the beginning of this process where I was like, I really should just record every moment of this on my iPhone. Like when we first kind of got the call that it was happening, I was like, I started filming and I was like, maybe I should just document this whole thing because I know. But then I went, you know what? No, I gotta be in it. I gotta be present.
I think Kevin was filming me because we got a call from a studio that brought us in and they said, hey, we want to make this movie. We're going to give you the money. We're going to buy the script and we'll give you XYZ to make it. And we thought it never happens like this, right? It doesn't happen this easily. And we were like on the back celebrating as soon as we got home, and then we get a call. He's not doing the movie. And we're like pouring the drink back into the bottle kind of thing. Just like, oh shit. And we were like, this is going to be a roller coaster. And we're like, all right, we have to figure out a way to get him back on board. And it was like back to strategizing. And it was just an up and down experience all the way through. Yeah, we very quickly had to put our phones away from filming this and get back to thinking about how we could get them on board.
Wow. Guys, if you cannot tell, all three of us genuinely love this movie. We've loved having this conversation. It's really just felt like a bunch of friends just hanging out, talking about Nick Cage, which is the best kind of conversation in the world. So seriously, we appreciate you taking the time to chat with us.
Appreciate you guys having us on. Thank you so much.
Really fun. Enjoyed it.
Thank you so much to Tom and Kevin for stopping by and joining the show. In a way, I feel a little bit bad for those guys for the amount of time that they have had to talk about Nick Cage. And I know that comes with the territory, right? You sign up for this movie, you're going to be asked and answer a lot of Nick Cage questions. And I thought they handled it really well.
I mean, but how is that really any different than like, man, at the Thor junket, Chris Hemsworth really had to talk about Thor a lot. Like, I mean, that's the topic. That's it. That's the bit.
It is.
No, but this is so Nick Cage. I see what you're saying. Like, there's like it's a lot of Nick Cage discussion, and like and to a point where I think it would probably make Nick Cage uncomfortable. Like, I don't think he likes talking about himself that much. You know what I mean?
Well, you know, it's funny you mention that because Kevin and I did the junket for a limited series called The Offer yesterday, and I actually was wondering because Kevin and I were fairly early in the day, and the show is about the making of The Godfather. And I was wondering, I wonder if like halfway through the day, the cast is going to be like, I am sick of talking about The Godfather. I'm over it. So yeah, to your point, I get that.
What's actually funny is like every interview I did for that, I don't even think we ever talked about The Godfather.
Oh, that's weird.
That's what I talked.
Well, because I used like jumping points, like for example, and this is not a spoiler or anything, but when the show comes out, you know it's about the making of The Godfather, so you're going to see filming of other famous things on those sets at that time. So I use those as launching pads to like have the cast talk about famous scenes they would like to have gone back and seen filmed in general.
Is that interview? Are your interviews up yet?
No. I just got my links today.
I'll put them up later.
The show did inspire me. I've never read the book before, and so I actually just bought the book because I've never read it. So
there you go.
So I'm excited to plow through this.
Does the book consist of all three of the stories?
I don't
just the first one?
My understanding is it's just the first one. Because and feel free to cut this out. At the end of the limited series, they start talking about what the idea for 2 possibly could be.
Okay, well, then that's history. Okay,
so my understanding is it's just the first movie.
Yeah, and I because it's interesting because I rewatched the 3 Godfathers recently, and I actually purposely in my life never watched the third one because I just always heard it was such a down step from 1 and 2, and I just kind of avoided it. So I ended up watching the Coda version.
I would say, did you watch Coda or the theatrical?
Yeah. So I watched Coda, and I'll keep this brief, but weirdly enough, I think Godfather Part 2 is still my favorite of the 3. I think 1 is the masterpiece because Brando is just so perfect, and you can't get away from the Sonny death, the Michael restaurant scene. I mean, there's just too many moments. But I love 2 because I think 2 flows better from a pacing standpoint. I like the back and forth. I would argue, and this is going to be a bit of a hot take, that Pacino gives his best performance as Michael in 3.
Interesting.
In 3.
Interesting.
Well, he has more to work with too, because he has more to like think about what Michael was saying. And I also don't think 3 is. I mean, it's not as bad. It's not as bad as everyone. My
only problem with 3 is that Sofia Coppola, who I love, a phenomenal filmmaker, I just thought she was out of place in terms of the caliber of acting that she was doing against who she was against. Sure. But I will say the final scene, the final moment in Coda, I won't spoil it, but there's a moment where Pacino has like a really emotional reaction to a scene it's got to be Pacino's best work as Michael. It has to be. Weirdly enough.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It is really good. All right.
Anyway.
Going from the Godfather franchise to the MCU, another very popular topic on our show, because the first reactions or the first look to Thor Love and Thunder finally dropped. To me personally, it a little bit felt like Marvel just got sick of being asked, where is it? And so they spliced together some footage, because it doesn't show you a whole heck of a lot, which is fine for a 90-second teaser.
Preferred.
And you know, the way that it was put together with some bits of the Guardians, which I think are going to be in the first half of the film, or the first chunk of the film, and then setting up the character that we got at the end of it. Are we going into spoilers? Can we talk about full on reveal?
It's a trailer.
Spoilers of the trailer?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No,
well, just the fact that you see Natalie Portman's Thor.
Sure. Yeah.
That's out there.
Well, they just released a poster today with her.
Oh, okay. There you go.
I get that from a marketing perspective, but I wish I would have seen that moment on screen for the first time. Yeah.
Okay.
Just because that the hammer, I mean, for people who are listening, this is in the trailer. This is not a spoiler. We have not seen the film.
Yes. If you wanted to avoid things that happen in the trailer, skip the section that says we're going to talk.
Yeah. But the moment is like the tag in the trailer is basically kind of like Evans's moment in Endgame when the hammer comes into Evans's hands and like, which is such it's one of the greatest cinematic moments ever. And Natalie Portman's been one of those characters in the MCU that I wished had continued more, because I love the first Thor. And if you missed our tier list, Brando's first Thor is my favorite Thor of the films. So that, to me, emotionally, I would have loved to have had that moment not spoiled for me.
I agree with you, but I think with regards to the trailer,
marketing.
Well, but I think the cat was already out of the bag for that one, because didn't she come out on stage?
Yeah.
And was like, I'm gonna be.
Yeah, but it wasn't like but the moment of the hammer coming to her hand, and then like her arm looks so badass.
But Marvel's pretty good about withholding stuff. So anytime they show us something, it always makes me wonder. Okay, well, no, but it's not just that. But it's like, okay, if they're showing us that, what are they not showing us?
I don't think she's gonna go through the workouts for a misdirect.
Yeah, we're waiting for the Deadpool cameo. Will just have to be in the movie then, right? Versus.
I always stand by the fact that I wish they protected Hawke being his opponent in Ragnarok. I think I've said that on the show before.
That would have been fantastic.
Now,
it was a great reveal.
On a selfish, this is actually really funny since we have a video component. On a selfish time period of this particular conversation, when I did the Ragnarok junket, and I was happy that the Hulk reveal was in the trailer for the purposes of me asking about it at the junket, because you can't talk about things that you don't see.
Sure. Yeah.
But I remember getting this amazing story from Hemsworth, because he's a friend from work, was actually a line that a kid gave him on the set who was there visiting, that like I don't remember he was there for some reason, some special reason. He was there to tour the set that day. And I think that the kid threw the line out, and that's the line that Chris ended up saying.
Cool.
I'll find the video. It's on my YouTube.
It's going to be Kevin Feige's Air. Watch.
Right. No, but literally there was like I'll have to find, it's on, if you just search YouTube, Thor Ragnarok, Kevin McCarthy interviews, Hemsworth tells this incredible story about this kid. That line is from a fan, basically, who was there visiting.
It's a great line.
This is funny because when I walked in the room, I guess a reporter before me had given this to Hemsworth.
That's awesome.
And so when I sat down, I think I had just interviewed Brolin for this movie called Only the Brave. I think I have the time period right, but I was wearing a Deadpool tie, and he was like, "Dude, you're wearing a Deadpool tie to a Thor interview?" And he's like, "Here," and he handed me this, and I had to hold this over my tie the whole interview like this. But what's funny now is that
he gave it to you?
Yeah, it's
that poor reporter that brought that specifically for Chris Hemsworth thinks that Chris Hemsworth has that poster right now.
Well,
and it's in your freaking basement.
In the interview, Chris gives it to me. Chris Hemsworth gives it to me. So it was almost like I was like, okay, and like I guess he was just making a joke. But now that Deadpool could possibly be in this one, like that whole interaction is just funny.
You got to wear a Deadpool tie to this one.
Oh, 100%. I'm like, that's if I get to talk to them for this one, I will. But as you guys know, as these Marvel films get more and more, they start taking away the main talent from a lot of these interviews. So I got Hemsworth for all the Avengers films and all the Thor films and everything, but I don't know about this one. We'll see.
Well, and we'll let you know too, since people do appreciate the behind the scenes of it all. Much like Spider-Man No Way Home, we're going to be doing the Doctor Strange press, only having seen a portion of the movie. So for casual audience watching at home, that means that there are a lot of spoilers in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness that they don't trust the press to protect. So we'll see how
One
that
of
goes.
the things that I keep hearing, again, rumors are rumors, and then this is still within the Thor Ragnarok discussion that we're having, because it is interesting. We're kind of getting two massive Marvel films within like a month or so of each other.
May and July, yeah.
It seems almost a bit like, oh, wait, I almost forget which one's coming first. But Doctor Strange with Sam Raimi directing.
Yeah.
And I've seen this online. I don't know if it's true, but if Tobey's Spider-Man does have the ability to show up in this film, I mean, that would mean we get Sam Raimi directing another Spider-Man scene again.
Correct. Yes.
Is that have you heard this rumor?
I think that I've heard the rumor for sure. I would be willing to put it at 100% that it's not happening.
Really? What? But why?
Sean and I were talking about the Tom Cruise thing. I would say Tom Cruise is 100% not happening.
I think that's just online speculation.
Wait a second. But if you're Sam Raimi and the No Way Home just opened up the multiverse.
Sure.
And we got Tobey to come through and Tobey goes back, we assume.
Right.
Theoretically, couldn't Doctor Strange jump to that universe and we could get a Spider-Man
it could be anything, scene? Man. That's the whole thing. It could literally be anything.
Why wouldn't you do that? But it's Sam Raimi.
It's true.
It's too easy.
And you could argue this too. You could say that while he's in Atlanta filming all his No Way Home stuff, you stick him in front of a blue screen.
Right.
He reads a couple of lines and you stick him into his old apartment from the previous trilogy.
If you watch the scene at the end of the Thor Love and Thunder trailer where Natalie Portman catches the hammer, this is just a educated guess. I bet you her and Hemsworth weren't even shooting in the same space at that moment. It's like a shot of Hemsworth looking at her and then her catching it. Most of these films, that's why I said this in the show last week, it's amazing how they get it done and make it look the way they do when all these people are in different places and different things and
months apart.
So I'm just Sam Raimi doing another Spider-Man shot just to kind of give him that credibility back because everyone didn't love 3. I kind of like 3, but it's fine. But like 1 and 2 are so great to give him one more chance, almost like giving Garfield his chance to get his character back in a good spot. So.
Any final thoughts on the trailer though for Thor?
Well, the use of the classic Thor costume made me really happy.
Him
running. I know it's
song.
Brief, just him running.
Well,
you don't like Sweet Child of Mine? It's classic.
But that goes with the whole Ragnarok vibe that you don't like. Like I loved it because it reminded me of the Ragnarok vibe.
I love that song. Yeah. So let's give our thoughts on the trailer. Jake, go ahead.
No, I thought it was a fantastic trailer, but because it leans into what I loved about Ragnarok. I love that it looks like we're going to get like a cheesy 80s montage of him working out, like I think that's fantastic. I got a legitimate, but like in this, it's like making fun of it in the sense, and they're like within the MCU, like I think Taika's going to do it in a really interesting way. And granted, we're talking 90 seconds. I legit laughed out loud at the like look in the eyes of the people that you love, and then he like comes in.
I
laughed hard. See, I love Hemsworth like just having fun with this part.
See, now we're starting to dig into like the differences of what we like.
Humor.
And
it's been very well established that I like funny Thor and you don't like funny Thor. I don't like fat Thor, but I like funny Thor.
So here's my argument.
Thor's pretty funny though.
Here's my argument towards that. If you watch any of the comedy between Thor and Chris Pratt in the Avengers films that the Russo brothers directed, those beats make me laugh so hard. But when I see Taika do it with both of them, it didn't make me laugh. So I don't know if it's a tonal thing, but like, remember at the end of Endgame when they're on the ship together and they're joking about that thing, that was hilarious. But like tonally it worked. Like that bit about the eyes thing didn't make me laugh at all.
I want to point that out too. The reason that the Guardians are in this movie is because Guardians 3, I'd have to go all the way back now to when it was supposed to drop. I think Guardians 3 was supposed to be the next film after Far From Home. And then because James Gunn got fired, it went Endgame and then Far From Home. And then what ended up being the next? Oh, then they went to Black Widow. They went with Black Widow because the timeline was so Thor leaves with the Guardians at the end of Endgame. I think that the next movie, that May movie the following year, was supposed to be Guardians 3. which would have had Thor in it. So Thor would have been in a Guardians movie.
Oh,
then James Gunn gets fired. He's off. He gets rehired. But in the meantime, they shuffle. So they shuffle Black Widow over. They shuffle Eternals over. No Way Home happens. And now the next thing you get around to is a Thor movie that has to put the Guardians into it. So it's I find that kind of interesting how they shuffle those decks. And
I dig the 80s like He-Man vibe. Like to me, this was like the closest we've gotten to a live action He-Man movie in the modern era.
Y'all know that's Russell Crowe catching the lightning bolt too, right?
And we didn't get a look at Christian Bale, which I'm kind of excited. I kind of hope that they hold off on that. Like honestly, like I'm good. Do we need enough? I know we're gonna get one, and I'll press play on it when it comes out. But we don't really need another trailer.
Last thought on this trailer though is it was exactly what I expected it to be. It didn't surprise me.
I think that's fair.
That's all.
All right, let's throw to an ad break. We're gonna pay some bills, and we'll see you guys on the other side.
What bills do we have?
My salary.
And we are back talking about films that are opening for you guys to check out this weekend. On Netflix, there's a movie called Along for the Ride. Unfortunately, the three of us have not been able to see that yet. But if you're looking for something on the streaming service, that is a new film that is dropping. We also have an animated movie for the families out there who went to see Sonic. You now have another option. You can go see The Bad Guys. Jake caught up with that. I thought it looked kind of funny. Jakey, how does it play?
Yeah, it's one of those. And again, I always try to look through this through the prism of like if you're a parent who takes your kid to go see it. Yeah. I mean, the opening scene alone is an animated remake of the diner scene from Pulp Fiction. That sort of tells you like where it's one of those things where like if you know, you know, and if you don't, you don't. It's framed like that last shot where the Jules and Vincent like get up when everyone's like terrified in the diner and like not moving, and you know they get up and like they're still having their conversation as they walk out of the diner. Like that's sort of the opening scene, but it's animated with animals. So it's that that's like funny. There's a lot of like jokes in the movie that's like that are they're for kids. It's a family film. It should be, but there are also a lot of like fun little embedded jokes in there, like you know if you know you know for adults kind of thing. I thought it was cute. I thought it was funny. There are actually a couple of moments that actually audibly made me laugh out loud. I mean,
Sam Rockwell is one of the voices. Who are the other voices?
He's the lead. Mark Maron, Craig Robinson, Zazie Beetz, who's fantastic, Awkwafina. So it's a really good cast. Everyone does a great job. I enjoyed it.
Also, I want to point out that the concept of it is actually really cool because we talk a lot on this show about layered villains and how there's no good and bad, and in the sense of like people are layered and complicated. And I think one of the great things about the idea for this film is it kind of like hopefully will give kids this concept of it's not black and white. The people are layered. They do things for a reason. That's why we always say it's interesting that Killmonger's arc in Black Panther is fascinating because the guy killed over 100 people or whatever, but we still care for him. So I think this is a good representation in terms of like what it means to be layered and not have like this like, oh, I'm just a bad guy who wants to take over the world. Like, I think one of the greatest examples of that is probably the spoof that Mike Myers did with Austin Powers, Dr. Evil. It was like that's just like a classic dark villain with like no like there's he has, you know what I mean, and there's really no layer to it. He's just playing that bit. But I do like this concept of like understanding an arc of somebody's life and why they become the way they are. And then in this example, they're probably trying to be good, I would imagine.
Not that I'm breaking any ground, but do you know who's probably the most layered villain thanks to the way that they were handled in pop culture? Darth Vader. Gotta be Anakin Skywalker, right?
Oh yeah. Well, Vader's. So interestingly, that's a great one. Vader's. So the moment that hit me for sure, like because Empire and New Hope, he's pretty much a villain, I argue.
Absolutely.
But
one of the
Return of the
scariest
Jedi
you've seen on screen.
Yeah, but the Return of the Jedi reveal with the mask off, like I actually felt for him. I felt bad for him, and then. Say what you want about the prequels, but they give that so much more context, right? Like they give, especially from Phantom Menace to Revenge of the Sith and like what happens to that kid in between. And then, because that's the thing, Darth Vader, you're right. Like in the first two, it's like this guy is horrible, like horrible. But then you go, oh, I actually get.
I think it's most exemplified in the teaser poster for Phantom Menace, which is one of my favorite posters of all time. Yeah, it's brilliant. Anakin as a little boy looking down with the shadow of Darth Vader against the wall, and it just said the tagline is "Never look back." And I just thought that tells you everything.
It's a masterful poster. It's like honestly, like it's literally the whole arc of his character in a poster.
It's
like,
I think
it's
Kevin
pretty
was
amazing.
talking about redemption for like Tobey Maguire and Sam Raimi. Hayden Christensen, I think, is going to get some redemption.
Yes.
When he's in the Ewan McGregor show or the Obi-Wan, and he gets to play out Anakin Skywalker again, I think people are going to realize. I hope that people realize that he's a better actor than he got a lot of credit for.
Yeah, if you've never seen him in Shattered Glass, you're missing an incredible film and an example of how good of an actor he really is.
And also, like, one thing about what's fascinating, and this is kind of how our culture is at the moment, is like we really like these stories of like bringing back somebody who maybe like didn't get a chance to like play the role properly and then give them the floor and good right. I mean, Andrew Garfield's probably the biggest example of that because his Spider-Man films were essentially kind of written off. And then he comes back and he's like a fan favorite now, and everyone wants Amazing Spider-Man 3. So I wouldn't be surprised if like you said, we're going to see like this Hayden Christensen like resurgence where he's like everyone's favorite, and like we're going to go back and like look at 2 and 3 and go, oh, he wasn't that well. 2, no, 3, the Lord Vader rise moment still is awesome. So I'm
stuck with bad dialogue, unfortunately. He got
Natalie Portman.
Natalie Portman did too. Exactly, 100%.
And there's so great actors in those movies. They're just, and again, this is a broader discussion we could have at another point. That's why I don't think George Lucas is a great director. I think Lucas is a great idea person. He's a great thematic and production person. I just don't think he's a good director. I really don't. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I think he's perfectly fine. I think him and Eastwood are probably on the same level for me in terms of like direction.
He's a better director than that. But that's a conversation for another
day. But Lucas is not a great director. Does anybody think he's a great director?
No, but I'm not sure that
I think he's
that argument.
But I think he's a brilliant storyteller.
Storyteller,
right.
Is the word.
Right.
And because he's a visionary in terms of special effects, like the way that he's pushed
famously his direction to for Anakin or for Hayden Christensen. Hayden Christensen tells the story. I think he was sick or something. So I love George Lucas, but he famously had a sign that said more or less, and he would do a take, and he like couldn't talk, so he would just point to more or less. Like that was, which to be fair though,
you should do that for the podcast.
To be fair though, I kind of do, I got gestures, but to be fair though, with the, again, not throwing Hayden Christensen on the bus, but with the right actor, that could be all you need. I feel like if you go up to Daniel Day-Lewis and he's giving you this entire personality, and you say more, he could probably give you a whole new book on this person.
Because wasn't DiCaprio offered the role of Anakin and he turned it down? And it just makes me wonder, like, I fully believe that like the lines, particularly for episode 2, that Hayden was given are not great, and it would take a brilliant actor to make those lines work. But DiCaprio is a brilliant actor, so would DiCaprio have been able to make the sand monologue work, or is that actor proof?
It was a different DiCaprio at the time as well. I think maybe we're a little jaded by some of his best performances coming well after that.
Are we going to get some weird like Jar Jar Binks resurgence with Obi-Wan?
I don't think so. No, because I think he's on Tatooine, and that's
where's Jar Jar?
Literally, he's in the deleted files on the computer.
No, but like where, like in this Obi-Wan. In the Obi-Wan series, where
Isn't
is
he part of the Galactic Senate?
Well, there was a rumor that he was going to show up, and I love this idea. I read somewhere that they confirmed it's not happening, but I'd read a story, and I thought this was brilliant. That he was going to show up, Obi-Wan was going to run into him, and he was basically going to be sad, depressed, disheveled, homeless. No, but if you follow it, whenever he realizes that, if you think about it, he's kind of at fault for putting Palpatine in power. He's the one that like trusts Palpatine and makes the motion in the Galactic Senate to put Palpatine in power. And he kind of, the storyline was going to be sort of this like, the bumbling fool realizes the error of his ways, and it's just like and I was like, oh my God, that could be brilliant. And that's a correction. That arc, that could like make people in the same way that like Rogue One explained.
The role is going to be reprised with Willem Dafoe in the.
See, what you guys aren't realizing is we're going to be getting. The world we live in right now. They're going to put Jar Jar in Obi-Wan. He's going to become a big fan favorite, and then we're going to get a Jar Jar series.
No, they're going to give us a baby Jar Jar. That's what they do on Disney Plus.
As long as it's somewhere
Jar
in the
Goo.
Baby Jar Jar series, they explain how he like convinced Palpatine to swipe right on Rey's grandmother.
Oh, Jesus.
Eventually, that lineage has to be connected. So.
What if like the Jar Jar series is like the best series that Disney Plus has ever made? It's like
I just want to know what the
masterpiece.
Star Wars universe dating app is called. That's going to be a great rabbit hole.
Hold on. Do you know what would melt the internet? Ryan Johnson's Jar Jar Binks series.
That people wouldn't be able to, that would honestly destroy Twitter.
He should tweet that. He should tweet that for April Fool's one year.
That would be really funny.
10-part series on Jar Jar from Ryan Johnson.
Anyway, The Bad Guys opens in theaters this Friday.
That was a long rant from Vader.
So does Robert Eggers' film, The Northman. So make sure you go back and check out our interview with Robert on, it dropped on Wednesday, but it's available wherever your podcast needs are met.
Wherever you're listening to this, scroll down.
I loved this movie. I thought The Northman was great. And this, we're going to probably disagree on this, but to me, it's my favorite of Robert Eggers' films because I don't love The Witch or The Lighthouse. I think that they're good.
I think I'm a witch man. Not to dismiss by no means to dismiss the
Those are
Northman.
called warlocks.
Yeah, very well. Sorry, I love The Witch, but I'm sorry, I interrupted. But
I think they're I like them both, but I loved The Northman.
Sure.
And
so wait, where are we? I don't remember. Where are we? Because I thought I was in the minority of not loving The Lighthouse.
I
like
love
The
it.
Lighthouse. I didn't love it either.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's interesting.
But we all agree it's third place.
Yes, for me it is.
Lighthouse is third.
Yeah.
I go Witch, Northman, Lighthouse.
Same.
Okay, and I'd have to revisit The Witch, but right now I put Northman above it. But so when he describes it as his popcorn flick, like I know we were saying like, what does that even mean, kind of thing. Can Robert Eggers make a popcorn flick? But I do think this is one of his most accessible. Like if you are into Game of Thrones and storytelling like that. It is a souped up version of that.
Yeah.
It is him just diving in with both feet and giving you like from the minute that this film starts, I felt the cold and I felt the water that they're riding in on, and the music plays a big part of it. And when they go through the ceremonies, these ancient Viking rituals for this young boy to become a man, and Ethan Hawke is growling at Willem Dafoe,
farting and
I was just
burping.
in. Yeah, I'm just in. At that point, I was like, all right, this is what this is, and I'm riding with it. And it gets super intense. And he's a great filmmaker, so it has a lot of solid technique to it. And we talked about in the interview with him, if you go back and listen to it, his choice for visual camera movements and, just embracing the elements. I don't think that Nicole Kidman is getting enough attention because it's hard to talk about her part without giving away some important elements about her character. And I want to stay away from those as much as possible. But I want to say, I thought she was fantastic. Listen, again, not breaking ground. Hey, Nicole Kidman was good in a movie. But I think there are a lot of times when she's still good in a movie, but I always see like, oh, it's Nicole Kidman. This was one of those times that I just forgot. Like I got completely engrossed in the world and her performent. And I thought that she was incredible.
So unlike a role she would take.
Agreed. Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Her performance in Northman, and again, this is nothing to do with thematics or story. It kind of reminds me of how Cate Blanchett's performance in Nightmare Alley got a little bit buried.
Oh, interesting.
Because like I thought that was one of Blanchett's best performances of her whole career. Like it blew my mind how great she was. Like I wish we spent more time in that office with her character. And I don't know why just now, as you were talking about Nicole Kidman and kind of like later on how she's a bigger part of the story. But it's funny now that I think back on The Northman, just like Nightmare Alley, I almost forget about how much I loved Kidman or how much I loved Cate Blanchett in Nightmare Alley. It's kind of a weird thing because like they're both kind of in the second half of both films in a thematic way. But they're both phenomenal. I know it's a weird transition, but Kidman is damn good.
I mean,
the
both
movie.
in the sense that they're both A-list Oscar winners who don't really, I mean, we get so in both of those films, we get so much movie before they really become a massive part of the story.
That's the point I'm making. Yeah.
No, it makes sense.
And with Northman, you can go through Alexander Skarsgård and Anya Taylor-Joy, and then Eggers even too. Like people discuss his filmmaking before you even get to the point. Oh, and then also Nicole Kidman's in it. You know,
right?
She's like such a massive talent, and Defoe and Ethan Hawke and all these people that you can mention. So I loved it. I gave it 4.5 out of 5. I just thought it was, if you're looking for, and this is an unusual recommendation, but if you're heading out to the theaters looking for a brutal Viking film, I don't think that they come much better than this. Yes, Gabriel.
I wanted to add my 2 cents because I did get a chance to see this one. And I want to rewatch it maybe this week now that it's out. But I want to go back as well to The Witch and maybe even The Lighthouse, even though I saw that more recently. There's something about Eggers where I love his filmmaking. I love his choices. Everything is really interesting. It's very unique, and it feels like he has a very distinct point of view that he's approaching the material from. And that's intriguing. That's always intriguing, and for me, entertaining. But there's and I really want to rewatch The Witch because I feel I can't remember quite my reaction emotionally to The Witch.
I just rewatched it actually last week because we actually the day we had him, the day we recorded with him, inspired me, and I actually think I liked it more this time than I did because I hadn't seen it since theaters.
I go down that long road to say that the only thing that my only critique really of the Northman is that I didn't have an emotional reaction to it. It never like swept me away. It never pulled at me emotionally.
How much of that, like, since it is correct me if I'm wrong, this story came from, this is the story that inspired Shakespeare to write Hamlet. And
is that true?
That's that. I read
I think
that,
so from what I think what I heard, and maybe we're conflating 2 different things, but from what I understand, and again, part of, like I say, his approach that I like, he set out and he often does with his films to be very authentic, and if it has some sort of basis in history, to be very true to that. And this, he claims, and it's being touted, and it seems to be true, that this is the most accurate Viking story ever told. They went through great pains to sort of learn and study and have the correct sort of advisors to figure out the culture of the Vikings and tell the story and the characters as they would be from what we know.
But the story itself is one that we've seen. I mean, from what I understand, to dismiss it, it's like it's Lion King, and that's
the point I'm getting at. He says that because he's telling this very strange, he's trying to put you in a culture that is so different and so odd, and he wants to keep it real. He doesn't want, again, I think that's part of maybe why I don't emotionally connect to it, is because he's really interested in grounding it in this culture that is so different than ours, that is so different from any of our time. I mean, he says he based it in, he specifically calls out Hamlet and The Lion King, so that there's this familiar basis where, because it's his popcorn movie, an audience can come in and they can follow the story without him having to explain too much because they've heard the story.
Well, almost adjacent to that in a somewhat similar way. It's the same. Whenever people would come to me and would complain about the story of Dune, and they would say, well, Dune is just a very
Star Wars.
I've seen that story 1,000 times. And I go, it
was before Star Wars.
I do want to clarify. Sorry. Just if anyone was concerned that like this is exactly Hamlet or exactly The Lion King, that like we're telling like
there
a
are
spoiler.
No lions.
No, it's that's not a spoiler. The trailer does set up that like it's a revenge flick about his father dying.
A prince who comes back.
And that's the basis that it jumps
the
off
Red Band
on.
Trailer, I thought, gave away a number of really important things.
Oh, I don't know if I saw the Red Band Trailer.
I would recommend
it also
not.
gave away the shot that we love.
I wouldn't even say it. I would just recommend
yeah.
not watching it if you're intrigued, just because there's plenty there that I don't know that the story's given away, but they show so much that it comes deep that if you remember that trailer really well, for me, that's distracting.
See, that type of trailer coming out from mean to me, and I'll give my quick thoughts on it. Mm-hmm. When that type of trailer comes out, they're really trying to sell the movie, because like
it's a $90 million movie.
Right, it's expensive film, and also when you put the Red Band out and you see this wonder of him fighting, it's like, oh, I would go to see it immediately if I saw that shot.
I will say, whenever I showed that in my newsroom, a lot of dudes in my newsroom went, okay, I didn't really know what this movie was, but now I feel like I got to go see it.
That's the popcorn. I know so many people that are just gonna be, whether they know why or not.
There's also the Vikings show, the Valhalla Rising show, which is like on the cusp, and people watch that. They're kind of in a Vikings mood. In terms of the Northman, my thoughts on it are pretty much exactly my thoughts that I had for the Batman. I gave it a 4. Both films were cold to me. I didn't emotionally connect to either of them. That being said, there are scenes and techniques and filmmaking tools and shots and performances that are so damn amazing and just wonders and brutal, immersive, just really good filmmaking. And Skarsgård is an absolute beast. Like this guy is just like destruction, like anything in his path. It's phenomenal. And you believe it because he's that big. And, Anya Taylor-Joy I thought was great. Nicole Kidman's great. Willem Dafoe's great. It's interesting. It's like, I felt like the Batman. Like I walked out and I go, I liked that. That was a good movie, but I was not blown away by it. And I kind of agree with Gabe. I did not feel that I was emotionally in it as much as I wanted to be. Another complaint that I have with the Batman that I also have with this movie is the characters are repeatedly telling us that they're on a revenge tale over and over again and repeating what the revenge is and what we're doing. And I'm like, we already saw it. We get it. We know it. And that to me comes down to that accessibility. And it's a Hollywood film, big budget. Do they make it easier for audiences to understand? I don't know, but it felt like it was like a bit over explaining stuff. And I'm like, I like subtlety. And I was rewatching some of the Batman yesterday. And I think I figured out my problem with that film because I love Jeffrey Wright so much as an actor, but I feel like Jeffrey Wright's in a different movie than everybody else. Like there's I
agree with you. With that,
he's
yes.
like, you know what I mean? It's almost as if he's like delivering his lines like a 60s comic style movie. But the movie's not fitting its tone. He seems like he's like, I don't know. You know what I mean?
Up on that. I did pick up on that. Yes. On my second viewing where I was like, he's doing something different.
It's a different movie. Yeah. But anyways, but I gave them both a 4 out of 5. Northman's a solid film. See it in theaters. This is definitely a movie you should support. I mean, Eggers is a really talented filmmaker. And if you haven't seen The Witch, highly recommend it. And as we said at the top of the episode, he was on our show this week and for The Lighthouse. But this week in particular, if you're interested in filmmaking stuff and just like aspect ratio stuff, there's some really cool stuff in there about his choices. He's actually a really super talented, thoughtful guy when it comes to explaining his filmmaking process.
The only choice of his in The Northman that I disagreed with was when Anya Taylor-Joy was talking to Alexander Skarsgård about his vengeance mission. And she said, Scooby-Doo this shit.
Yes.
And I thought that's out of place.
To be honest, that worked for me.
That worked for you?
That worked for me.
I thought that was,
and then she moved the chess piece forward and said checkmate. That was really good. By the way, I want to clarify, it is Anya Taylor-Joy. Just want to let you guys know.
Anya Taylor-Joy?
Yeah.
Gotcha. She was fantastic in the Queen's Gambit. So check that out.
Oh God. Yeah.
If you haven't seen it yet. The review that I have been waiting for from the moment that this film was announced is Kevin McCarthy's take on the Nick Cage film, The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. For whatever reason, I have not spoken to Kevin about this film yet since I saw it back at South by. You saw it at a press screening at some point.
Yeah.
I just haven't heard your reaction to it, Kev. So talk to me about how you felt watching The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent.
Well, I loved it. And I think Jake was saying this too. Like it is a different movie than when they initially announced the film. My thought process, based on the announcement, was, and again, this is completely my own interpretation, so it shouldn't affect the outcome of a film, but it's just what I thought going in. I was expecting him to go back into these characters, particularly, like have to use them in a way to figure out the situation that he was in. It's very different than that. It's he's hired for a birthday party for $1 million. And his filmography exists in the world, but he's still playing Nick Cage. And those movies exist, and people expect him to know how to do things from these movies, but he doesn't fully go into those characters like I thought it was going to be. That being said, the biggest surprise for me was the Pedro Pascal performance. I just think he's so freaking brilliant in this movie. Like he in a weird way, almost outshines Nick Cage in a strange way.
Nick Cage plays a straight man in it,
right? And Pedro
gets to be weird. Yeah.
He's there's something about that character that I never quite figured out. And I kind of like that. He was always mysterious to me in a perfect way. Like we thought one way about him or not. But for people who aren't familiar, basically his character hires Nick Cage for $1 million to come to his birthday party. And while there, some type of action scenario takes place that has to put Nick Cage and Pedro Pascal in a situation where they have to save the day. That's kind of the basic premise. But yeah, I mean, Pascal was so great. I won't go into details, but if you're a Nick Cage fan, it's all the ones that you love are brought up and talked about and shown. And I actually had never seen Leaving Las Vegas. So I watched Las Vegas the night before I interviewed Cage for the junket, and what a film. Elizabeth Shue should have won an Academy Award for that too.
I wanted to ask him about Leaving Las Vegas when we got a chance to interview him.
Because underwater.
I could never think about the way to get into it, but like he was a young man when he played that part, and I wonder how different he'd approach it, 20 years later.
Yeah, well, and it's a great question too, and you would have had a great in because they literally recreate the scene when he's in the bottom of the pool. That's in the trailer. I'm not spoiling anything, which is such a great fascination because that character is such a tragedy. What happens to him in Leaving Las Vegas? It's brutal. Yeah. But that being said, this was such a fun movie. I was just so engaged in it, encaged in it, whatever you want to say. I found it to be hilarious. I like the buddy comedy aspect of it. It's a buddy comedy movie. That's kind of like what it came down to for me with Pedro and Nicolas Cage. But Pascal was kind of the standout. He shocked me I've always liked him. Obviously, he was great. I loved him in 1984. Obviously, he's great as the Mandalorian. But he is just a star, man. Like that guy is awesome. So for me, I really enjoyed it. I'm a big Nick Cage fan. It is a different film than I expected, but it ended up being better for that. And there's a lot that I want to go back again and see it because there's so much going on that you're confused for a lot of it. You're like, what's real, what's not real? And it's actually kind of a fun adventure. It's a genuinely good action comedy outside of being a meta movie,
I think it is. Yeah, I think I anticipated it to be more meta than it ends up being, but it is a good sort of satire of Hollywood because Nick Cage is playing Nick Cage, but he's absolutely an exaggerated version of it like takes elements that you think you know about Nick Cage and plays with them. Right. But he also, and he's been doing a lot of press leading up to this, and the two guys who we had on the show talk about this too, is that the Cage himself is a little bit more reserved. Is more of a family person, and isn't that overblown, personality.
The neurotic character we think he is. Like, and it's so funny because one of my favorite performances of his is Matchstick Men. And that's like this like very quirky because I have OCD and he has OCD in the film, and there's this quirkiness, and that's kind of how I viewed Cage as a person. Like he's like that quirky guy, like The Rock, and like I don't know. But we had spent so much time with his characters that we just in our minds, which is kind of the brilliant point of this movie. Really, I think at the end of the day is that he's not the person that you think he is based on the movies he plays. Yeah, in a weird way.
Well, he's had so many roles too at this point.
Right. Jake, what did you think?
How did it play for you?
Yeah, I mean, I liked it. I think the to the point that we've been talking about that, it is a different movie than I thought it was going to be. What a lot of the aspects of what it is felt a little generic for me, a little bit more like the actual plot of like, oh, well, he's at this birthday party and the person's birthday party ends up being, the leader of a drug cartel. And I thought the aspect of with like the FBI, just all the like Ike and Tiffany Haddish, who play the FBI agents that are like kind of telling him what to do, like weren't really given much to do other than like shout into his ear, like shout instructions. Like I felt like there were a lot of aspects that could have been cooked a little bit more or figured out how to make interesting. I loved the meta aspects of it, the aspects of the movie that I was hoping it was going to be more of, I really liked, but the actual buddy comedy of it felt like, oh, this is fun, but it wasn't fun because of like the creativity of like, it was more fun just because of the chemistry between Nick and Pedro. But I felt like the actual buddy comedy plot, which is the core of the movie, felt just a little just generic buddy comedy to me.
Yeah, and Jake's not wrong. It's like I gave it a 4 out of 5. I mean, I think it's a really
3.5, 3.5.
Yeah, it's really fun, and I found it to be really enjoyable. And I think again, Pascal was the reason why it really kind of succeeded in a much better way for me than I thought it was going to.
But if you took Nick Cage out of this movie and the whole like it really wouldn't be anything special.
I think we all recommend it. So if you like Nick Cage, you're gonna get stuff out of it. If you're into Pedro Pascal and the stuff that he tries as well too.
I will say I was really worried when it wasn't super meta, knowing the hype that Kevin had. I was kind of devastated because I saw it at South by as well.
Yeah.
And I was a little devastated of like, because it worked for me the same way I think it worked for you, where it's like, it feels that it was better because it wasn't so meta.
Right.
So happy to hear that it worked for you in that level. Cause I was like, oh, this is going to be crushing.
Kev wanted Travolta to show up.
Don't get me wrong, though.
Kev was banking on some big time stuff.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I still wish like he became Castor Troy again, just for like a moment.
We're gonna get the deleted scene in which he becomes all of them.
Right.
They should release that like they did the Barry Keoghan Joker scene.
Yeah.
Like
why would you
put it
shoot
out?
that and take it out?
I think they said it just didn't with the story. It's always
But
story.
what a scene to have him play. I can't.
I know.
believe
Wait,
that.
he said to Jake. I think he told Jake that the studio told him he had to choose either the
that's
Nikki
right.
character,
That's
which
right.
plays.
Yeah.
I love the Nikki character. I wouldn't get rid of the Nikki character. I think he's terrific.
The de-aging
Or-
didn't look as great, but
No, but that's okay.
But it works because it's supposed to be kind of a mental image, you know?
yeah. You're
Like
right.
it still looks like what it looks like, but it worked for me in the sense of like I wasn't supposed to
De-aging.
believe that Robert De Niro was 35 years old in a diner, you know, like
All right. Earlier we were talking in the group about Moon Knight, and hopefully by the time you guys have listened to this podcast, you're caught up with episode 4 of the Disney Plus show. And part of the reason why I'm enjoying that show as much as I am is because of the outstanding work of both Oscar Isaac and Ethan Hawke, who is our blend game for this week. And, you know, I'm not going to choose Moon Knight because of 4 episodes, but he's really doing some amazing stuff as this.
he's great in the Northman too.
Religious avatar. Yes, he is great in the Northman. But my choice, I'm gonna kick us off, and I couldn't go with anything other than Boyhood. Like, did anyone else do Boyhood? No, good. All right, I'm the only one. For so many different reasons. You know, the story behind Boyhood and how they filmed it is remarkable. And so for him to be one of the people in that cast who maintained a character over the course of decades to shoot for Richard Linklater is incredible. But then when you break it down, Ethan Hawke showing us the different sides of this character at all these different stages of the man's life is remarkable. Like it's tremendous how he was able to find a continuity and a flow to play a young version of this character, a young man who's entering into a relationship, becoming a young father, to move on to become somebody who at the older stage of his life is now realizing how much life has sort of passed him by, and the things that he has handed down to his son and the things that he didn't get a chance to hand down to his son. And it's again stunning because they shot it over the course of 20 years. But then when you talk about how much Ethan Hawke put into the different elements of that character at different stages, it is absolutely, to me, one of the most mind-blowing performances that any actor has sort of given. I got to give a lot of credit to the young kid who plays the main character for Boyhood, because if you think of how much he had to sort of transition, not just as a person, but as a performer, and doesn't have the history that Ethan Hawke or it's Patricia Arquette who plays the mom.
Mm-hmm. She won the Oscar for it.
I gotta say Oscar winner.
That both of them brought to their roles. So I'm floored. Ethan Hawke's one of those actors, and Boyhood was what really solidified it for me. That for some reason I kind of dismiss him. I don't know why I dismiss him. Like I don't think that he's going to be as good as he always is, right? Like I sit down for a film of his and he completely melts my face, and I'm like, oh God, that's right. You're amazing. And maybe it's because he's just like, he's a really handsome dude, and handsome guys can coast, you know, like you don't expect them to be as good as they are.
In the Kimmel sketch where he's a part of the handsome men's club.
Oh no!
And it's a bunch of like good-looking actors like filmed around a circular table, and Kimmel's trying to get into the club. And at the beginning, Ethan Hawke makes a motion. He goes, "You guys haven't answered my request to legally change my name." And they go, "Change it to what?" And he goes, "Handsome." And they go, "Handsome Hawke." And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Oh, passed." And he goes, "Okay, I'm Handsome Hawke."
Yeah. So for that reason, I'm often to the detriment of myself surprised by how good he is. But Boyhood's an accomplishment that again, like who's going to touch that? Like who's going to film a movie over the course of 20 years and have it work out as well as it did? And so much of that is due to Ethan Hawke and Patricia Arquette. So I picked that. That's one I went with. So Jakey, where'd you go?
I went a direction I'm maybe thinking Kevin probably went to. If not, that we could.
I feel like, yeah,
I chose Training Day.
I was going to say before you say it. Yeah,
I was going to say. I'm sorry.
No, we both chose Training Day, and I bet you we both have the same scene we want to talk about.
Well, yeah, I mean, for me, the big thing is, particularly for that movie, everyone talks about Denzel's performance. And let's be honest, it is a flawless performance. But Denzel's performance does not work without Ethan Hawke's performance. They complement each other. They're two puzzle pieces. Yeah, I mean, it's just... And Sean, I love that we got the chance to talk to him about what ended up being his Oscar clip. And Kevin, I know this is probably the scene where he's in the bathtub.
Yeah.
And he has the shotgun in his face and he's about to get his head blown off and he screams at these guys, "I have a little girl." Mm-hmm. And it's just, to me, I don't understand why that scene doesn't get. And look, I love King Kong Ain't Got Shit on Me. I mean, like, I love Denzel in that movie. But I equally love Ethan Hawke, and you don't have one without the other. His performance is just, he has much more of an emotional roller coaster to go on. That, I mean, like Denzel starts at a 10 and stays at a 10, and then you could argue maybe ends at an 11. Like he is that way the whole way. What Ethan Hawke has to do is arguably a little bit more difficult because he has to justify this range of emotions within, if you think about it, like 18 hours? He starts in the morning and ends like he pulls up into his driveway at the end of the movie. I mean, that's, and what he has to go through in less than a 24-hour span and make it make sense and justified is arguably a little bit harder.
Well, and he's us. Like he's us, audience 100%. Surrogate.
Yeah, 100%.
I think there's literally a moment that you can see what Jake's talking about. Because that's the bathroom scene is definitely one of the scenes that I would refer to. But there is a scene early in the film where they're driving together, and Denzel's character stops the car in the middle of the intersection and forces Ethan Hawke to do drugs. Right, and I think he ends up doing like PCP or whatever in like that little tinfoil thing. That to me is the moment where he breaks a bit. Like this guy has a hard shell up, as Jake's talking about. He leaves the house in the morning. He's that guy who's going to follow the rules and do everything by the book because he wants to make detective. And then, Denzel points out that, that's not how this works. Like you have to bend the rules a bit to work your way up. But there's a moment in that scene where like Ethan's guard is so up in that moment, and you see Denzel break him. Like he breaks him, and the guy does drugs literally right in the middle of the way Denzel plays that, he pulls the gun on him and says, if this was an undercover situation, you'd be dead, or whatever it was. And then you go, oh wow, I do see what he's saying, because yeah, you're right. Ethan could be stuck in a situation where he's riding along and that happens to him. So you actually understand where Denzel's coming from, but then you understand why Ethan breaks. And then it's that forward. And then Jake, the scene when they get to, who's the older gentleman's house they go to early on as well?
Scott Glenn.
Yes. There's a lot in that scene basically it's almost as if you're taking a kid who had never been thrown into a horrible situation, and you see them put into real life, and you see how it affects them in that period of time. And Jake's right, like the arc he goes through, and that there's something about watching that while he tries to keep his balance and tries to keep his moral line correct. Like when he goes to rescue that girl in the alleyway scene, and he's being good cop, like getting those guys away. And then Denzel takes it to the more extreme. There really is like a good point about Denzel, because Denzel's extremities are only extreme because of Ethan's moral line, right? And I think that's kind of what they're playing with the whole time. He's so damn good in the film. And I remember seeing it with my buddy AMC Hampton Town Center, and I saw it 2 or 3 times, because I remember this movie was supposed to come out the week of 9/11, if you remember correctly, or around that time period, because I remember it coming out. It had a poster, and then they changed the release date for it because of 9/11. I don't know if it was the exact week, but they pushed it. I remember they pushed it. That and Spider-Man. And I just remember like Ethan Hawke being so powerful, and then I bought the DVD the day it came out. I was at Best Buy at 8:30 before they opened that morning. Yeah, Snapcase, the little black thing you open up, and then I think I still have it. But I'll check on the Training Day release dates, but I believe they moved it 2 weeks, but I'll double check it.
All right. Well, while you're doing that, for audience picks, Amy said Gattaca. Jayanta Mitra,
great.
Jackson Lowen, and many more went with First Reformed, the Paul Schrader film that he did.
Great performance.
Michael Breen.
So I got it. Original release date was September 21st. And then because of 9/11, they pushed it to October 5th.
Okay. Gotcha.
I remember because I worked in a movie theater and they had to change the poster out because it had the original date on it.
Michael Breen said no wrong answers, but he has to pick. And this is where I was going to go. He has to pick Before Sunrise. Before Sunrise, Before Sunset.
Was it the whole trilogy?
The last one. Yeah, well, I forget the third one. Such a tremendous, it's a similar concept Linklater's doing with those characters of just revisiting them. Before Midnight. Thank you. The third one's not quite as good as the other two, but Before Sunrise is terrific. Chris went with Sinister. I thought one of you two was going to pick Sinister.
I do love Sinister.
Honestly, I'm surprised.
I like Sinister's more of a Scott Derrickson film.
Yeah, I would say that kind of falls into the category when we talk about like the person has to be the reason that we love the movie so much. And I love Ethan Hawke. Ethan Hawke's really good in that movie, but Ethan Hawke isn't the reason I love Sinister.
Yeah, he's not the memory that comes to mind. When I think of Sinister, I think of like brutal, atmospheric, disturbing horror. It arguably is the scariest movie I've ever seen next to The Shining. No question. If you haven't seen it, highly recommend it.
Isaiah Washington and Josh Kiemig both went with kind of the way this shook out. They said Boyhood, but a huge shout out to Training Day. And then that was Isaiah. And then Josh had a toss up between Boyhood and Training Day. So we kind of covered all the bases. Thank you, everybody, for participating this week. For next week, you can play along with hashtag Rosario Dawson Blend. So play along on social media, or you can send us your picks
at
realblend@cinemablend.com. Yes, I know.
I have mine, and I'm curious if you guys will know what it is. I mean, mine's locked.
Okay. I'll guess next week. I think
Alexander.
I might know what it is. Drop us a review.
Just out of curiosity, before we end, do you have any idea what it might be?
I think yours is Clerks 2. I would say Clerks 2.
Oh, I'd say Sin City.
We'll find out next week. That's what.
Wait, is one of us right?
Either of those correct? You're locked in.
He can't say
one of you is right.
It's me. I got it right.
Yeah, honestly,
this is next week's segment.
I'm teasing.
I'm talking to them, trying to pry more information out of you.
We call that a tease, kids.
Our next premium episode, as mentioned, is a mailbag.
Too long of a trailer.
So again, check the description below for more information on how you can sign up. In the meantime, follow us on social media at Jake's Takes, at Kevin McCarthy TV, at Sean_O'Connell, at Gabe Kovach, and at Real Blend. Totally me. We'll be back next week with we're going to be talking about CinemaCon and all the fun things that we're seeing that I'm seeing in Las Vegas, including Top Gun in its entirety.
Yeah, well, Kevin and I are watching it together as friends. That's what friends do.
You guys do that. See you next week. Bye, guys.
Hockey pads.
Bazinga!